We have now coming in from Locked On Knicks, Gavin, Schall here to talk about Alec Burks, Nerlens Noel. $20 million for Burks and Noel. How are you feeling about those deals, and what else do you think the Knicks are going to do today?
Wow, I am shocked by the Nerlens Noel news. So shocked. I'd not yet heard the Alec Burks news. What was the contract for Burks?
It was 3 years,
330.
32, 30, yeah.
Yeah, that was
330.
Oh wow, so essentially the same
Same.
contract. Well, yeah.
Yep.
The Nerlens one I really don't get. To me, it's almost a sign that they don't think they're going to be able to afford Mitchell Robinson either in an extension this year or in an unrestricted free agency next season. I'm shocked that they're bringing him back. Not that he wasn't a good fit in New York, but he was a poorer version of Robinson in just about every capacity. Really struggled catching the ball around the rim. And
Been there.
there was a notion in New York at different points when Robinson got hurt that Nerlens could essentially do the same thing at a cheaper price. And that was pretty definitively proven incorrect, even though they played well with him in terms of wins and losses. There was a distinct drop off in team rebounding, and he's just not anywhere close to the same offensive threat as we saw in the Atlanta series. The Burks contract, I don't mind as much, but it still feels a little weird when you think they're going to make a major upgrade on the wing at some point. I don't know why they would lock themselves into him for 3 years.
Real quick, Woj just said Conley is 3 years, $72.5 million deal. So a little bit more than what Sham said, about $4 million more. So a little different. But going back to the Knicks, so you think that this is a sign for Mitchell Robinson that they're not going to be able to keep him or afford him? What would be the reason that they wouldn't be able to bring him back, and where do you think he would go? Or do you think they're going to do a trade or something else?
Yeah, so I'm saying I think that's far from a guarantee. It's definitely not something I know for sure, but just given the money they're allocating to Nerlens, and they're going to the whole point of all of this is that they're going to make one, if not two, star swings at some point. I don't know how you can pour. I don't know. However, I mean, what would it be? $30 million a year, given the contract Jared Allen just got between the two of them, like $20 million for Mitch, 10 for Nerlens into the center position. When you're going to have to extend RJ Barrett at some point, obviously Julius is going to get his contract. Then you want a Damian Lillard in here, and you want another star to complement those guys. It doesn't really add up. So I'm kind of stunned by this because I'm really, really high on Mitch, and I just don't see any upside in that Nerlens deal.
Not to put you on the spot, but when does Mitchell Robinson's contract come up? Could this be a this season thing where he's on the move, or do you think it's a next season, or
so he's restricted. Oh, he would have been restricted this offseason, but they essentially delayed that for another year. They can still negotiate an extension with him if they choose to, which is something that a lot of people thought was pretty plausible. But now with this Nerlens news, I'd be kind of surprised if it happened.
Interesting moves for the Knicks. What else is on the horizon there for the New York Knicks, do you think, today? I think Bobby Marks, you said they have about $17 million in room still.
Yeah, well, Evan Fournier was rumored to be in line for something around a 3-year, $54 million contract offer for the Knicks. Obviously, that's going to go down $1 million after this move. I guess 3 for 51 would be what they could offer him. And I mean, I think he's a massive need, but given that they got Burks, again, it's almost similar. I would say Fournier is the Mitchell Robinson of sort of the wing position. Then I'd kind of be surprised if they splurge for both those guys because you sort of expect them to play similar roles. Maybe Fournier instead is replacing Reggie Bullock in that starting lineup. But Fournier is a very different player, and he's more in Burks' mold in terms of being a guy who can create a bit off the dribble, who can shoot the three. Certainly a better player than Burks, but I don't know why you would bring Burks back if you were also going to bring in Fournier. Maybe just to have more shooting and ball handling, two things the Knicks certainly needed, but it feels like a little bit of overlap and an inefficient allocation of cap. Again, especially when the Knicks presumably wanted to have a lot of money in the tank for next summer. So all these moves are very, very confusing. Maybe they're just accumulating contracts for a trade down the road, and they think the numbers that they got these guys are movable. I would kind of disagree with that notion unless there's some late career improvement for both of them, but I guess we'll see going forward.
There were talks, we talked earlier with Matt Peck of Locked On Bulls about Derrick Rose going back to the Bulls. What's your thoughts on Derrick Rose with the Knicks? And then where do you think he goes? Or does he stay with the Knicks this offseason?
Yeah, so there's a case that Rose was maybe the Knicks' best player the final 30 games of the season or so through the playoffs. He was certainly the only guy who showed up consistently in that Atlanta series. That being said, I'm okay with them moving on from him. I mean, depending on who the alternative is at the point guard spot. Obviously, Lonzo Ball was sort of the name that the Knicks were bandying around all season long. That's now off the table. All the big fish, Chris Paul obviously going back to Phoenix, Kyle Lowry seemingly going to Miami. So I'm not 100% sure what they would do at the point guard position if Rose wasn't the name coming back. At the same time, given his age, his injury history, I'm okay with them not allocating long-term money there. And I think Emmanuel quickly is eventually going to be the guy to man that spot, but they need someone who can get dribble penetration at the time being, because Rose was essentially the only player who provided that with any kind of consistency for the Knicks last year.
There you go. Gavin, Schall, Locked On Knicks. Go listen to that stuff. There's going to be some interesting conversations today, I'm sure, with you and Alex Wolf about Nerlens Noel and Alec Burks and what else they do in free agency.
I haven't talked to Alex yet. I'm kind of scared to hear his reaction. I feel bad, Nick. I keep coming on these Locked On shows in a state of utter depression. It's not good. The Knicks are supposed to be on the upswing. I want to be more optimistic. But yeah, weird start to the Knicks offseason.
I'll pull back the curtain a little bit, and then I brought you on for the first pick for the Knicks to do in our to do an interview in our live show, and you're like, okay, here we go. This is the pick, and you're waiting for it. And then they traded that pick. And then I brought you back for the next pick, and then they traded that one too. I just kept bringing you back, and they just kept trading it. And you were like, I don't know what they're doing. I don't understand.
I know. I feel bad. I just come on. I'm like, yeah, I'm confused. I don't know. I don't know what to say.
We eventually got you on there. But
yeah, we figured it out. But yeah.
Gavin, Schall, go follow him. Locked On Knicks, the podcast as well.